Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cameras and Coffee. And today I'm going to take a question from Dixon about old lenses and new cameras and things like that, and we'll see if we can dive into it just a little bit. Real quickly, from Colta Katrina, the one bag of coffee I picked up while I was in Finland right here. It is their light roast, pre-ground, grocery store coffee. It's okay, nothing spectacular. It was interesting, the whole time we were in Finland, we went to all these coffee shops. And if they sold whole beans, I don't remember seeing it at all. It just didn't seem like coffee. Like here in the US, you walk into a coffee shop and almost all of them sell either their own coffee or the beans that they use in their coffee. And that just didn't seem to be as much of a thing over there. Okay. Anyway, so yesterday Dixon asked me a question. At some point, please demystify what is meant when people say older lenses cannot keep up with newer sensors' resolution, or why putting old lenses on GFX is not a waste. That's like two completely different questions, both really hard to answer. So what I did was I came up with 7 things about old lenses and the way that lens design and manufacturing has changed over time. And we'll go into those in detail in order. And I have the computing technology, materials research, the use of lenses, manufacturing accuracy, printing demands, lens use changes, which is different than lens use, and we'll talk about why, and then camera technology improvements. And so those are the 7 things that I came up with that lead to people seeing old lenses as being worse than new lenses. And they are both correct and incorrect, and why in that, okay? So the first thing is computing technology. Lens engineering was done by hand or later rudimentary computers, whereas today computers can develop lenses and they are way more powerful than even a few years ago. And modern computer technology means that lenses can correct for more of the Zeidel aberrations than other higher order lens flaws. So basically, what does that mean? When lenses were first designed, more than 100 years ago, obviously computers did not exist. I'm hoping that's not news to you. But lenses still had to be calculated. So people like Zeidel and Petzval, Rudolph, I'm blanking on the Zeiss, the really famous Zeiss engineer's last name, Rudolph, dang it. Anyway, a lot of these really good historic names in early lens design, they were calculating the surface profiles of lenses by hand. Long form math, slide rules, things like that were used to figure out what shape the lens surfaces should be to deliver the optimum performance for what they wanted to do with the lens. And so that computing technology was literally hand-done math by engineers. Today, there's still a lot of, there's way more math involved, right? There is way more math in a 20-element lens than in a 4-element lens. Convince me otherwise. It would be hard for me to be swayed from that opinion. At any rate, so there's a lot more calculation now, but the computers are really strong. Right. So I've tried using some lens design software just out of curiosity to see how it worked. Could not figure it out because I don't know math at all. But at any rate, the software capabilities now are way stronger. So whereas before people had to figure out how each of the surfaces had to be ground on the polishing machines, now the computers can do a much faster and more accurate job of that, right? In theory, more accurate, especially with very complex optical systems. So that computing tech has just gotten way better. And that's a reason why modern lenses would in fact be better than old lenses, because those computers can develop designs or refine designs that allow the Zeidel aberrations, the higher order flaws, to be corrected, as well as taking care of things like sharpness and field of view and things like that. So the next one I had was lens materials research. Lens optical glass types today are the most advanced ever and use more than just flint and crown glass in spherical or aspherical shapes. Aspherical, of course, being a later development in lens engineering. And those different types of lenses, lens elements, the glass used, have different refractive indices which move light in a different way. And this applies also to the coatings on lenses. So the actual glass type, or material type I should say, of the lens element, as well as the type of coating on the lenses, affects things like how the light is refracted, how much of it is lost to reflection, and how things like that. So the coatings and the glass types that are available, or including plastic types, because I know Canon uses a lot of resin elements in their lenses, today are way more diverse than what was available 20 or 50 or 100 years ago for lens development, okay? That's a major, major improvement. The next one, we're going to go out of order here, manufacturing accuracy. Manufacturing tolerances are never perfect to the Planck unit, so some lenses may be off by more than others. And this is also true of cameras, specifically as it relates to register the front of the flange area to the sensor, right? Or in older cameras to the film plane. A lens that's perfect on a camera that is imperfect in its design. So let's say you have a lens that is perfectly made, right? And a camera which is imperfectly made. That lens could appear to be imperfect on that camera, right? And so having a camera that is not perfect could lead someone to believe that a lens is a bad performer when it's not. Also, with advances in lens manufacturing, more advanced designs are possible, and a major example of this is the way that molded glass versus ground and polished glass can be used for aspherical elements, which allows for more complex aspherical surface profiles, okay? That's a major, major improvement versus when you grind a glass element, right? You might have seen videos of this on like how it's made. There's a grinding wheel that just goes over the element, and so you end up with a spherical shape. Okay, it's much harder to do that type of grinding to make an aspherical surface. So most aspherical, if not all aspherical elements today, are made by molding hot glass into metal molds that have been milled on a lathe to the correct size and shape. And is it Panasonic, I think, on their aspherical elements, then they also do give it a polish to get rid of most, if not all, of the lathing marks. That's why onion rings appear in photos, in blurry areas of photos that have aspherical elements, because those are lathe milling marks. Anyway, the manufacturing accuracy today is way better than it was 50 or 100 years ago. And and it's also faster, because back in the day when things were done by hand, it could be done to really high tolerances, but it just took a whole lot more time to hand polish elements and get them to those tolerances. The next one I had was use, right? Old lenses, this is how much the lens itself was used. So this goes to the question of the perception of old lenses being worse on modern cameras than perhaps on film cameras or things like that, or an old lens of a spec being worse than a brand new lens of the same spec. Old lenses may have been heavily abused, disassembled and repaired, and not rebuilt to proper element alignment. So a terrible old lens in your bag may have been great until some goofball wanted to clean a dust speck off the inside and left one of the inner elements at like a 2-degree angle. Easily happens, right? Reassembling a lens is a very precise thing. And if you've ever done the front element swap on a reversal on a Helios lens, you can see that like putting in the lens element wrong or cockeyed or something like that will absolutely affect its performance. So if you have a vintage lens on a modern camera, it might look like it's worse than a modern lens of the same spec simply because it's been abused or dropped or something like that. The next item I had for why old lenses are perceived as worse is printing demands. And this printing is a major driver of the way that lenses have been used over the years. Lenses used to be designed for sharpness, but not contrast. And this is mostly true of lenses about 100 to 120 years ago. And that's because printers wanted sharp lenses that delivered flatter images. And a lot of that's because there were printers who were doing printing, but also that's what photographers wanted when they did their own printing. So that was 100 plus years ago, and vintage lenses of that age are much flatter than modern lenses, with darkroom printing requirement. Darkroom printing back then required filtration from the person doing the printing, whether it was a photographer or a specialist printer. You'd put in the contrast filters into your black and white and larger, and then you'd have a nice flat negative, and you could use the filtration to adjust the contrast at that point. Back then, many photos were printed in smaller batches with filtration, dodging, burning, and even image developer pairing. So you take the negative, the person who did the printing would look at the negative and say, early prints from it and say, this would look really good if we developed the paper in this different developer. Happened a lot for the really good printers who knew how different paper developers responded to different papers and how developer age affected the way that they caused papers to develop. Really an amazing amount of knowledge in there for back in the day, most of which has been lost, unfortunately. At any rate, many photos were printed in smaller batches, and it was not as ubiquitous until the 40s and later that lots and lots of people were taking photos. So the needs of photo printers way back in the day drove what lens designers developed, because mass photo printing starting in the 40s, 50s, and 60s meant that there simply was not enough time to figure out the best contrast enhancement for every photo, and contrast had to be baked into the lens so that it would be in the negative. Okay, so lenses became more contrasty with bulk photo developing, so that these mass machines that would take a roll of film, develop it, chunk out 36 prints. No one's got time to do 150, 200 rolls of contrast enhancement a day for every single image on 36 negative rolls. So lenses had to become more contrasty, which is where the design, the coatings, and things like that came into play, because mass production mandated that. So the printing demands of the photographic industry required that lens design change. The next one up that I had is lens use changes. So even 50 years ago, there was not this entire cottage industry of people online testing lenses for pixel level resolution due to their own lack of more creative and more informative testing procedures. As a personal aside, if you've ever wondered why I do that dots test chart in my round glass review videos, it's because what it looks at isn't the pixel level resolution of the lens. It looks at the way that the lens delivers sharpness across a flat plane, as well as out of focus area. And quite frankly, looking at field curvature, out of focus area characteristics, and things like that are way more important for understanding how your lens is going to deliver images than asking whether or not it's going to be sharp down to the pixel level. So lenses, since that cottage industry have arisen, have become sharper, and that's largely solely, I shouldn't say that. There's two reasons why lenses have become sharper in the last 15 years. To meet the demands of lens reviewers who want their 30 megapixel files to resolve skin cells, and also because sensor resolution has increased. 20 years ago, when cameras were like, oh my gosh, 6 megapixel sensors, that's unbelievable how many megapixels that is. And now it's like, oh, okay, 100 megapixel sensor. The demands of those sensors are way different, okay? So lenses did have to be engineered to be sharper to keep up with that, but I'm going to argue another driving force of that was people who did lens reviews who just would zoom in to 100% detail or 200% or higher and just say, wow, this pixel's soft or not, which is kind of a ridiculous way to test a lens, because unless you are taking a photo to look at the individual pixels, there's no reason to bother testing for that. Unless you are, if you're going to take a photo to look at the whole image, that's what you should test for. All right, and the last reason I came up with was camera technology improvements. Cameras today are way more demanding than images that were taken 10 to 20 years ago because sensors have much smaller physical pixel sizes. And that means lenses have to perform better, which we just touched on, by the way. And also, there's another thing if we look at going from film to digital, okay, in this vein. Film functions fundamentally differently than digital does. With a digital pixel stack, if you imagine that this is the back of the sensor and the lens is over here, a pixel, if you enlarge it to a huge thing, looks rather like a tube, okay? Because you've got the pixel back here and then some filters on top of it. And so the light kind of has to hit it straight on. The pixel's way out at the corner, the light's coming in at an angle, okay? And so you get that light that's not coming into the tube, right? You lose more, you have greater light loss on a digital sensor than you do with film. Wait, hold on, why? Imagine film. You have the emulsion here. It's not a bunch of tubes, it's a bunch of crystals. So when the light comes into the corner at an angle, some more of it will get past those crystals. And so you have less light loss. You have more light reaching the corners of your images on the same size full frame sensor and film negative versus, when you're talking about digital versus film. So because film is not all of these little tubes, you get more light reaching into the corners. And that is why, if you've ever looked at an image from a film, if you take a lens and put it on a film camera and a digital camera, I notice this often when I do the round glass review videos, the light loss on digital is way, way more pronounced. It's called digital vignetting, okay? Sensor vignetting, some people call it. And basically, it's got to do with that tube structure. So a lot of the differences in the way that new lenses perform, also has to do with the media that they are designed to perform too. Sensors versus film, because of the fundamental difference in the way that light is received on those two media. So a lot of people will see a vintage lens on a digital sensor and proclaim it as not being as good because it's not performing in the way that it's not performing in a manner which is optimized to the sensor. I think that's probably the best way to put it. So ultimately, old lenses really aren't bad. They're just different. Asterisk, some old lenses really are bad. Some older lenses have way more image character than new lenses, meaning that they're not technically perfect. They input their own image character into the way that they render images. And older lenses are simply a joy to use for that image character because, this is my opinion here, modern lenses often feel like they are engineered, by and large, for technical perfection with captivating image generation as a secondary consideration sometimes. So, to that end, the last question Dixon had was, why put old lenses on a GFX? Why not? Just to kind of see what they can do. If you want to know what I have on my GFX at this moment, it's in the other room, or I'd show you. I have this thing called the Gizmon, I don't know how it's pronounced. It's spelled WTU lens. I think it's Wutu lens. It's basically two plastic elements from disposable cameras that are in opposition. It's literally a rapid rectilinear double gauze lens. On full frame, it's a 16 millimeter lens with massive light loss and crazy image character. On GFX, it's a rectilinear 11.8 millimeter lens. So ridiculous. Anyway, so why put it on GFX? For fun, okay? Do I expect lenses to perform as well on GFX as they do on full frame? Definitely not. And do I plan to have a couple of GFX lenses? I do. Actually, the GFX came with one. Because, yeah, a sensor like that should be used the way it's designed for really good photos as well. At any rate, I think what all of this is meant to boil down to is that lens design has always been done to the best of the lens engineer's ability, given the tools that they have, the needs of the photographic industry, the expectations of the photographic industry, and the capabilities of the manufacturing systems that back up what the lens engineers can do. So I don't think that old lenses are necessarily worse. I think that what they do is something which was designed to be different for a medium which receives light in a different manner than sensors do. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you again in the next Cameras and Coffee.